So what I want to do is have you tackle this problem first. You loaned a friend $500. He promises to repay you $100 at the end of each year for 5 years. If the discount rate is 6%, how much is that worth today? So first, can someone unmute yourself and share with your classmates what variable are you trying to find with this question?
Present value?
Yes, we're looking for present value. And the clue is, thank you, Brad. The clue is that it says, how much is that worth today? Today is the present. And Davis also responded, so thank you. So go ahead and work this problem and put your answer in the chat, and I'll give you a few minutes. You can use the equation or the keys on your financial calculator, either one. Okay, I see answers coming in now. Let's take a look and see how we can tackle this. So here is the equation. So first of all, let's take a step back. First of all, you have a good friend, obviously, because you're loaning your friend $500. The friend promises to give you $100 a year for each year for a total of 5 years. So we call that series of payments a certain term. Does anybody recall what it is from doing the homework and watching the video? I'm now specifically referring to the payments, the $100. Okay, someone put in annuity. Yes, this will be considered an annuity. So annuity is just a series of payments. It needs to be the exact same amount, and it needs to happen at regular intervals. So this payment is $100 every year for the next 5 years, and it's always occurring at the end of the year. So every December 31st, you receive $100 from your friend. So that's called an annuity. Now, there are 2 types of annuities. One type means the payments occur at the end of the period. The other type means they occur at the beginning of the period. Does anybody remember the name of the annuity when it occurs at the end of the period?
An ordinary annuity?
It's an ordinary annuity. Yep. So this is an ordinary annuity. Thank you. And that's important because if it's an annuity due, we use a different equation and we make an adjustment on our calculators. Okay, so we need to definitely distinguish, okay, what type of annuity is this? So this is an ordinary annuity because it says they occur at the end of the 5 years. All right, so let's look at the equation for finding the present value of an ordinary annuity. This is the equation. And it looks a little complicated, but it's actually not bad. And I tell people it's really just straight up algebra. So what we want to do is we want to just fill in what we know. The PMT is the payment amount. That's the $100. Okay, so that's what he's repaying you every year. INT is the interest rate. You'll also see this abbreviated as I on your calculators. In this problem, I called it the discount rate. So when we're talking about taking payments receiving in the future, and trying to figure out, well, how much is that worth if I was to get it all today? That means we're discounting back those payments to the present. So you'll see the terminology discount rate, but you should think to yourself, it's just interest rate. So if it says a discount rate is 6%, it's the equivalent of saying the interest rate is 6%, okay? So where it says interest, we plug in 0.06. N is our time period, and the time period is 5 years. Don't forget the negative in the equation. That's very important. So it's negative N, so -5. And then we divide all of this by the interest rate, which is 0.06. So I tell people work inside out. So start with the 1 plus 0.06, that's 106. Raise it to the -5, and that would be the 0.7473. Multiply it by a -1 and make it a negative, and then add 1. Right, and that would be 0.2527. Divide that by the 0.06. That would give you 4.2124. My calculator is set to 4 decimals. And then multiply that by the payment amount of 100. And you get your answer. Now, let's try to make sure we can decipher this. So what this means is that if we took the value of these payments and added them up as if we had received them today, they would be worth the equivalent of $421.24. If I had $421.24, I invest it for 5 years at 5%. At the end of that time, I will have $500. Okay, but paying $100 a year for 5 years really is not $500. It's less than that. Because since I'm waiting to get those $100 payments, I'm losing the opportunity to invest that money right now. So I should be compensated for that. So if you have a friend and you loan them money and they're going to repay you over a series of time, they actually should repay you in such an amount that it makes you whole, right? So it compensates you for having to wait for those payments and therefore not being able to get interest on them. Who has questions on this? And then I'm going to show you how to do it in the calculator. Okay, not hearing any questions. All right. So I will show you the variables and then actually why don't I just go straight to the calculator. So remember the problem. $100 a year for 5 years at a 6% interest rate. We're trying to find out what is the present value of that stream of payments. So I'm going to pull up my calculator thing here. And this is for the TI 83, 84. I think it would also be true for the 89. If I have any people in here who have a BA2, I can also talk about how to solve it on that calculator as well. So on your TI 83, 84, the very first thing you want to do is hit the word apps. It's located about your 3rd or 4th row from the top towards the left. When you hit apps, this is the screen you'll see. It says applications and number 1 is finance. Does anybody have problems getting to this screen? Okay, so then we hit finance, which is my all-time favorite key, the number 1, and you get this screen. Okay, and your cursor will already be on number 1, TVM solver. This is all we're going to need to solve these time value of money problems. So you won't need 2 through 6. Okay, we're just going to use number 1. We can do everything we need. Let's keep it simple. So you're going to hit number 1 for TVM solver. Let me go back up. Now, I had my calculator set. It's set to 4 decimals, so you see that. And I put zeros in for all of these variables. So my N is 0, my I percent, so this is the interest rate, that's 0, present value 0, payment 0, future value 0. And then P over Y and C over Y, just make sure those are set to 1. And then your payment, here's where you indicate if it's an ordinary annuity or annuity due. Most of the time, they're ordinary annuities, so the end word should be highlighted. There are periods when we'll have to switch the calculator to begin, and I'll show you how to do that, but right now we want it in end. Any questions so far? Now,
what do you say it was called? End and beginning annuity?
So the end annuity is called ordinary annuity.
Okay.
If it's begin, that's an annuity due.
Okay, thank you.
And I did not make those words up. I don't know why they didn't just say end annuity, begin annuity. That would have been a lot easier, but there we go. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to start inputting what we know into the calculator and finding the present value of this ordinary annuity. You can input the variables any way you want. I just started at the top. So I went to this first row. You can just arrow there if your cursor's not already there. And I typed the number 5 and hit enter because it's 5 years, right? So I'm going to get a series of payments, 1 payment a year for 5 years. My I is my interest rate. So after you hit enter, your cursor is going to move down to I automatically, or you can use your arrow key to get there. And when you're in the I field, you type the interest rate, which is 6. I think it's down here. Here we go. Now here's the thing. Notice it's just 6. You don't put 0.06 and you don't put 6 and a percent sign. You just enter the number. Okay, so I just type 6 and hit enter on the I line. Any questions so far? I'm going to skip present value for a second because that's what we're looking for. And I'm going to arrow down to the payment row. And in the payment row, I'm going to type the number 100 because the person is paying me back $100 a year for the next 5 years. So this is the annuity amount. It's $100. So you type 100 and hit enter on your payment. Your future value is totally irrelevant to this problem. You were asked to find the present value of these payments. We don't care what the future value is in this particular scenario. So I just put future value as 0. We don't need to worry about it. So I have my N is 5 for 5 years. My I is 6%. My payment is $100 a year for 5 years. So now I just need to solve for present value. So you put your cursor on the present value line and you're going to hit the alpha key, which on my calculator is green, and the enter key. And I have a picture of the TI 8384. Let's see, where is it? I think it's here. Yes. Okay, so I'm just using this to show you a picture of it. Here's your calculator. Here's that apps key that you started with to get into the financial keys, time value of money stuff. After your cursor is on the present value row, here's the alpha key. You want to hit this green alpha key, and then you want to go down to the lower right of your calculator and hit enter. And if you look right above this lower right here is the word solve in green. So that's basically what you're telling the calculator to do. Find the present value of this annuity based on the information I just input. So it's alpha, and enter. Mark, do you have a question?
Should the cursor be over the zeros when I'm hitting the alpha and solve?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else have a question? All right, so let me go back to my calculator strokes. So my cursor is now here on present value. I'm going to hit alpha and enter. And here's what I get for present value. $421, and I would say round it to 24 cents. Now, notice the answer has a negative on it. If someone pays you $100 a year for 5 years, you're not getting negative money, okay? This is a calculator thing. It's just the way their algorithms work when they do time value of money problems. It's true whether you have a BA2 or a Casio or a TI, they're all going to make one of the money fields, so present value, payment, or future value, one of them must be negative. So you can enter the number as a negative. I could have entered a negative 100 here, and the payment, the present value would have come back as $421.24 positive. But since I entered the payment as a positive number, it's going to put a negative in front of it for the present value. You just have to train yourself, ignore the negative. If you do the equation, you don't have this problem. This is strictly a calculator thing in the way the artificial intelligence works in a calculator. Any questions on that? I see someone has some hands raised. Go ahead and shoot, just share your question.
Yeah, I was just curious, could you quickly go over how to get the 4 decimal places? I switched over to the TI-84 just so it would be like with the majority of class.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to that picture of my calculator. Actually, no, I think I can show you on my calculator. But what I'm gonna do, just so you know, I'm gonna hit this mode key. You see the mode key right here? Second from the left.
Yes.
So I'm gonna hit the mode key. So hit that, and then I'll show you what my calculator says. All right. All right, so I just hit mode, and this is what my calculator looks like. Okay. You want to scroll down to the word float. And then you want to scroll over to the number 4 until the number 4 is highlighted. That means 4 decimals. And then you just hit the enter key. And then you're
So,
in 4 decimals, and you can hit the second key and the mode key, and that would quit out of that. Did that answer your question, Caitlin? I think it was Caitlin.
It actually did. I was gonna ask you that same question, and then I had one more. Will we ever have questions where any of those answers are supposed to be negative?
No, you're not going to have something where the present value, payment, or future value are supposed to be negative.
Okay.
The only time any of this will be negative is if you were investing at a negative interest rate. Which, believe it or not, there are some people who do that, but it's like, why would, so if you invest in a negative interest rate, you put $100 in there, you're going to get less money out. Why would anybody want to do that? So no, we're not going to do that. Any other questions?
I've got one.
Uh-huh.
I'm looking over the equation form of doing it.
Mhm.
And why is the 5 negative?
That's just the equation. You could also, it was easier for me to write it as a negative than for me to show you it as another divisor.
Okay, because I'm looking at the formula I have written for an ordinary annuity, and it just had to the degree of n, not negative n, which is why I'm really
It probably
confused.
has it on the divisor side, right?
What do you mean by that?
So what does the equation say?
What I've written down is the PMT times brackets, parenthesis on the numerator, 1 plus the interest rate to the n power minus 1 over the interest rate, end bracket.
Okay, so let's see. Oh,
So did I have something wrong with the formula is my question.
you might, I was trying to follow what you were saying as you were saying it, because the present value of an annuity formula is negative. Now, if you were doing the present value, just straight up present value of a future value, it's not negative. And if you were doing, so I wonder if you're doing the right formula, but let's keep going. So I've got some more equations in here, and then we can check and make sure you've got the right one in the right place.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we did this one already. Okay, so this is basically the same problem, different dollar amounts. You loaned a friend $5,000 today. He promises to repay you $1,000 at the end of each year for 5 years. If the discount rate is 5%, how much is that worth today? See if you can solve this using the equation or the calculator. And then put your answer in the chat when you get it. I see a few answers coming through now. So again, this must be a really good friend of yours, right? Because you loan him $5,000 today, and their friend promises to repay you $1,000 a year at the end of the next 5 years. What type of annuity is this? Someone just unmute yourself and share.
The ordinary annuity, right?
Yes, it's an ordinary because ordinary means the payments are happening at the end. So your friend is paying you back December 31st of each year. Did you have a comment, Fabian?
Oh no, I was just answering what annuity it was.
Yep, you were right. All right, so now here's a pictorial representation of it. And sometimes this helps people. So you're standing here today at time 0. This is the present. You give your friend $5,000 here. Notice that's not really integral to this problem so much, right? But you hand your friend $5,000. And then your friend on December 31st of each of the next 5 years is going to give you $1,000. What I need to make sure you see is that you're actually not receiving $5,000 in value back from your friend. You're getting less than that. And here's why. So the first payment your friend makes is $1,000 on December 31st. If I look at what's that worth today, standing here at time 0, that's really only worth $952.38. The way I get that is I just take the $1,000 divided by 1 plus the interest rate. So the discount rate is 5%. So that's the interest rate, and raise it to the 1. That's the time period, right? Because this is the first year. So what that means is if I stand here today, if I had $952.38 and I could invest that at 5%, I would have $1,000 at the end of the first year. So by your friend giving you $1,000 at the end of the first year, that's actually only equivalent to $952.38 today because they didn't pay you the interest that you could have earned, but you didn't earn because they hadn't paid you yet, right? They're not giving it to you till December 31st. So this time period between 0 and 1, you can't make any interest because you haven't gotten the money yet. And that interest, it looks like it's about $48, right? Because that would be the difference between the $952 and the $1,000. So you're giving up that much in interest. The second year, at the end of the second year, your friend gives you another $1,000. That one's worth even less. It's really, in today's terms, only worth $907.03. You can use the same present value equation to figure that out. Just take the $1,000, that's the future value, divided by 1 plus the interest rate, 1.05, raised to the 2 because you're getting it at the end of the second year. So this second $1,000 payment is only worth $907.03. And then we can do the same thing for each one of these payments that we're receiving in the future. We could actually say each one of these we're getting in the future, and we could calculate the present value of each one. Notice the further you go in the future, the smaller the present value is, because this is more time that you have to forego getting interest. So this last payment out here, this $1,000 received at the end of the 5th year, you had to wait all this time before you get this last payment. And so you don't get any interest on this last payment. So it's only worth $783.53. If I took $783.53 and I invested it at 5% for 5 years, I would have $1,000. Okay. So at the end of the day, your friend is paying you less than what you gave them. They're only paying you $4,329.48. They're supposed to give you $5,000. The difference is the interest that you could not earn because you didn't have the money yet from them. Does anybody have any questions on this? It's more of a pictorial representation of it. All right. So this is another way. I think when I was doing this, I was just tired of typing the equation, so I just copied it over. But this is another way to solve a problem. This problem is similar to the first one we did. You loaned a friend $500. He promises to repay you $100 at the beginning of each year for 5 years. What type of an annuity is this? Put that in the chat. It's an annuity due. Very good. Because now, instead of your friend paying you at the end of the year, they're paying you at the beginning of the year, which is interesting. So you hand your friend $500 today. Your friend immediately hands you $100 back because that's the first payment and it's made at the beginning of the period. So they're giving you $100 back right away. Then the next January 1st, they give you another 100 and so on and so forth. So go ahead and solve this one. It says the discount rate is 6%. How much is this stream of annuity due payments worth today? See if you can solve it in the calculator. Or if you want to, you can also use the equation.
What does the C stand for in that equation?
Oh, sorry. So sometimes it means payment. I actually prefer the PMT because that matches what's in your calculators. But you'll see some textbooks use the C, which means cash flow. So it's just the amount of the annuity. This is the $100. Okay. So we're going to find the present value of receiving $100 a year at the beginning of each year for 5 years. Let's take a look. I just plug in what I know. $100. I put in everywhere I see I put the interest rate, which is 6%, right? So 6% here. I divide all this stuff by 6%, and then this last term, I put 6%. My N is 5 years because it's a 5-year period that he's going to repay me, and notice it's negative. Okay. Now, this last term out here is what makes this annuity due, because since it's an annuity due and they're paying you at the beginning of the period, you end up with one extra period of interest than if you had gotten it at the end. So this represents the one extra period of interest. This is the annuity due part. The rest of this equation is exactly the same as the ordinary annuity. It's this part that makes it annuity due. So then I just do the math, and I get $446.51, which I think a lot of you got in the chat. So what this says is I loan my friend $500 today. My friend is going to repay me $100 a year at the beginning of every year for the next 5 years. It's an annuity due. But the present value of that stream of payments that my friend is paying me is only worth $446.51. I'm not really getting $500 back from my friend. And the reason is because my friend should be compensating me because I have to wait until I receive these payments. And so while I'm waiting, I can't earn interest on all my money. So that's the difference. That's why this is less than 500. My friend should be compensating me for the interest that I'm losing while I'm waiting for him to pay me back. Any questions on this? Okay, here I think I have the next slide shows you what it looks like in the calculator. Now, in the calculator, the big thing is you need to change your calculator to begin mode. And let me show you how to do that. All right, I'm going to share screen here. So for my TI 8384 people, here's the problem in my calculator. I put 5 as N because it was 5 years. The interest rate is 6%, so I type 6. Ignore this. This is from the old problem. I type in $100 as the payment, and I change the annuity. It's no longer an annuity, ordinary annuity. I now arrow over and make sure the word begin is highlighted. So you just arrow down all the way to the bottom, arrow over it and highlight the word begin. So now I've told the calculator this is an annuity due. That's all you're doing is just telling the calculator, use the annuity due equation. Now I'm going to go back up to present value. So I'm going to put my cursor in the present value row and I'm going to hit alpha enter to solve for present value. This was what it was as an ordinary annuity. When I do alpha enter, notice under annuity due, the present value is slightly higher, $446.51. It's higher because I get one more period of interest since I'm receiving the money at the beginning. So here's how much it would be if it was an ordinary annuity and I was receiving the money at the end of every year for 5 years. Here's how much that stream of payments is worth when it's an annuity due. Because I get the money earlier, so I have the ability to earn interest sooner. Notice it's still negative. Because I entered the payment in as a positive number, the calculator will make the present value negative. You have to just ignore the negative. What questions do you have?
So I have one. So the discount rate, is that referring to basically the amount of money you're losing on each $100 because you're not charging your friend interest and you're losing the opportunity to invest in other areas? Or is your friend giving you 6% interest? I'm
Okay.
trying to figure out how to read this.
Yeah, so I think it's the first way if you want to think about it that way. Your friend is not giving you interest,
So that's what you means by discount rate, is I'm losing 6% on that.
basically. Yes.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Any other questions? Does anybody have a BA2 and need to know how to use that one? Or are we good with the TI 8384s?
It's like, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what factors determine the discount rate? Like, how do I know I'm losing 6% over that course
So
of
what
time?
a lot of people will do is they'll say, well, if I did have the money and I could invest it, how much could I earn from that investment? And you can, take kind of an average of what you could get, and that would be your discount rate. I'm talking about now as a personal, as an individual.
Okay.
Companies also do this, and we'll see that a little bit later. And there's a certain formula we can use to determine what discount rate should be for companies. But for individuals, it's basically whatever rate you could have gotten if you had the money all up front and you could have invested it.
Okay, got you.
Okay. All right. Let's stop share there. And I'm going to go back to my slides here. And I have another problem for you. Let me pull, let's make sure you can see it. So please work these with me, folks. The best time to try these is during class and during your homework. Don't try them. I mean, you don't want to start practicing at the exam, right? You really need to start practicing before that. Okay, according to news reports, Steph Curry signed a 5-year deal with the Golden State Warriors worth $201,158,790. And this was based on his average annual salary of $40,231,758. So these are real numbers. I did not make this up. I just pulled what is the latest contract Steph Curry signed. And this is what it says, and I put the source at the bottom of the page here. So it doesn't say if he gets paid his annual salary at the beginning of the year or the end of the year. If it doesn't specify, we always assume he's receiving the money at the end. So we're just going to assume that he's getting $40,231,758 at the end of every year for the next 5 years. What type of an annuity is this? If he gets it at the end?
Ordinary.
It's an ordinary. Okay. All right. So what management did when they were talking to Steph about the deals, they said, okay, well, this is your average salary, and we're going to pay you this amount every year for 5 years. So they just took $40,231,758 and they multiplied it by 5. And they said, okay, you just signed a deal worth $201,158,790. That's the 40 million and change times 5. You are finance people. Actually, that's not really what this deal is worth. Let's find out, what is the deal really worth today? How much is Steph Curry's contract really worth today? Go ahead and use either the equation or use your calculator, and then put the answer in the chat. All right, so let's take a look. I'll do the equation first. So we're going to use the equation present value of an annuity because his average salary is an annuity. Okay, I'm not talking about bonuses and stuff. I'm just looking at his base salary. So we're going to plug in the numbers that we know. Okay. The payment amount is the amount he's getting every year. Notice it doesn't change. So that's why it's an annuity. Same amount received at the same time every year for 5 years. So it's 40,231,758. It says the annual discount rate is 6%. So everywhere I see interest, I plug in 0.06. So that's here, and that's also out here. N is the time period. It's a 5-year deal. So my N is 5. And for a present value of an annuity, it should be -5. And then I just solve and always work inside out. So you start here, then you raise it to -5, multiply it by -1, add the 1, divide by 0.06. And here's what I got. Okay. So Steph Curry, I assume, has some pretty sharp people around him, and he actually may already know this himself. So, management sends him this information, and maybe he immediately sits down with his financial calculator and he says, all right, let me see how much I'm really getting. What he's really getting in today's money is 169,470,800. That's the value of the deal today. When you look at these contracts that ball players sign, invariably the press and management will just take the average salary and multiply it by the number of years of the contract. That is so wrong. Okay, so wrong. Because remember, Steph, while he's waiting to get paid his salary, is not able to earn interest while he's waiting. So he should have been compensated for that. If management said, I'm going to give you a deal worth 201,158,790, he should be getting a higher salary. Okay. So the value of Steph's deal is really about 169.5 million. It's not chump change. Believe me, I'd be quite happy to take that. But I'm hoping that you can see we can use time value of money in everyday situations. Let's look at how to input this on the calculator. Oh, you have a question, Mark?
So I guess my question is, how would you work backwards to find out how much he should be getting paid annually based off what the 5-year deal is worth?
Okay, so what we could do is we could say the present value. Let's say he says, I really want to get paid 201,158,790. We would plug that in as present value of the annuity. We plug it in right here. Then we would say equal, and we put a big question mark for payment. Then we do all the rest of this stuff, right? So still putting your 6% interest, still put in the -5 years, and we would just solve for payment. It's an algebra problem. Does that make sense to people?
That makes sense. I got you.
We could actually do that. We could figure that out. Let's do it with the financial calculator. So I'm going to switch over to the financial calculator. Let's see. Bear with me here. All right. Okay, so I cleared everything in my financial calculator. You don't have to do that. You can just retype over the numbers, but I just wanted you guys to see a clean slate. So I made my N 0, my I 0, my present value 0. I made sure that my payment is at N mode, right? Because we're assuming he's getting paid at the end of the period. So it's an ordinary annuity. I have to tell the calculator that. So I put it on N mode. In the payment period, I type in his annual salary. So here's the 40,231,758. So that's what he's receiving every year for 5 years. So you just type that in and hit enter on the payment line. Then I scrolled up. I said, let me just start from the top. So I scrolled up and I typed in 5 and hit enter for the N because it's a 5-year deal. Then I scroll down to the I line, and if my cursor wasn't already there, I scroll down there and I typed in the interest rate, the discount rate, which is 6%. So I just put 6 and enter. Then I scroll to the present value line. This is what I'm looking for, and I hit my alpha key and my enter key, and I solve for present value. Notice your calculator makes it negative. We just ignore the negative. Steph's not making negative money. Okay, so Steph's making the equivalent of $169,470,800.40. That is what his contract is worth in today's money. Anybody have any questions on how we put this in the calculator? Okay, let's do as I think it was Mark suggested. Let's go and figure out, well, how much should his annual salary really be if he believes he signed a contract worth $201,158,790. So hit your apps key, hit number 1 for finance, number 1 for time value of money solver, and we're going to go through and input the numbers. It's a 5-year deal, so I put 5 in my end line. The interest rate is 6%. I'm now going to put as present value the $201,158,790. Are you guys following what I'm trying to do?
Yeah.
And let me show you what my calculator looks like really quickly. So this is what I did. I put N in for 5 in for N, 6 for interest rate, 201,158,790 as the present value of the contract. If Steph says, hey, that's the present value of the contract that I want. And now I'm going to put my cursor on the payment line and I'm going to see what should his annual salary be. So I go up to payment and I'm going to hit alpha and enter. So this is what Steph should be getting. He should be getting $447,754,372.66 a year. That's what his annual salary should be if he wants to sign a contract worth over 201 million in total over 5 years. Does that answer your question, Mark? I think it was Mark who'd asked that question.
Yeah, it definitely did. So he's missing out on around $7 million a year.
Right. That's basically what this says. And he may be okay with that. So I don't want to suggest in any means that Steph is dumb. He may totally know these numbers and just be like, yeah, that's fine. Okay. But there are some ball players who really don't understand this concept, and management gets away with it every single time. Oh, you just signed a $100 million contract. We're going to pay you $25 million a year for 4 years. That's not a $100 million contract. It's less than that. All right, let's do one more. One more example. I think I have another one up here. All right. So we did the Steph Curry. All right. You can pay $10,000 as a down payment on a new car that costs $23,769. You want to borrow the rest for 5 years with a maximum monthly payment of $300 a month. The dealer says, no problem. You sign the paperwork and drive away with your new car. What annual interest rate are you paying? All right, so which variable are we trying to find with this question?
Don't we have that assignment thing? Sorry to interrupt, but like, I know we didn't have a lot of time last time.
Yeah, we've got enough time. I think we'll have enough time. It's only 3 problems. So I'll open it in just a bit. But I think this will help you, so I want to make sure we do this one first.
You're solving for interest rate.
We're solving for the interest rate, okay? So you can use the equation and plug in what you know, or you can use the keys on your financial calculator. I'm going to tell you now, it would be easier to try to use your financial calculator keys. If you use the equation, you've got to solve for this variable, okay? And which can be done, but it's a little bit clunky. Go ahead and see if you can work the problem and put the answer in the chat. I'll give you a few minutes. All right, let's try to work the equation. I think people need a little bit of a hint here. Okay, so you're paying $300 a month for 5 years to buy this car, okay? So first of all, that's an annuity, right? It's the same amount of money that you're gonna pay every month for the next 5 years. What type of annuity is this? It doesn't specify beginning or end of the month, so what do you assume?
That it's ordinary.
You assume an ordinary. You just assume that you're paying at the end of the month because it doesn't say. Okay. All right. So your payment amount is 300. We know that from the problem. We don't know the interest. The N is 5 years, but it's monthly. So remember we talked before about you make some adjustments if the payment is occurring more than once a year. So we're going to take 5 and multiply it by 12 because you're going to pay every month for the next 5 years. So you're actually going to make 60 payments total, right? 12 payments a year for 5 years. So your N is 5 times 12. Your I, if you multiply your N by 12, you need to divide the I by the exact same number. So everywhere I see an I divide by 12. Okay. My present value is the amount of the money I'm borrowing. So you're going to hand the dealer $10,000. They're going to say to you, okay, the car costs $23,769. So they're going to take the value of the car and they're going to subtract the 10,000 and you are borrowing the rest. So you're borrowing $13,769. Now, when you solve for I, and I kind of worked through it for you, you're going to get the monthly interest rate. The question says, what is the annual rate? So then you multiply by 12. And you get a rate of 11%, over 11%, 11.09%. Let's look at it from a calculator using a financial calculator. First thing, make sure your calculator is on end mode. If it is on begin mode, you're going to get the problem wrong. So what I try to encourage my students to do is after every time you do a problem, just make sure your calculator is on end mode. Look at our variables. In the calculator, I'm going to go to the row that says N and I'm going to type 5 times 12 equals. You'll see 60 show up in your calculator and you hit enter. You're going to skip the I because that's what you're looking for. You're going to go down to your payment and you're going to enter 300. I entered negative 300 because remember I told you in the calculator, one of the dollar amounts has to be negative. So since I'm entering in 300 as the payment and my present value is the amount I'm borrowing, that's the 13,769. I've got to make one of these numbers negative or I'm going to get an error message. Okay, so I just decided to make the payment negative. Some people like to think of it as, okay, I am paying $300 a month. So that's coming out of my pocket. So that's negative. To do this deal, the car company is basically giving me the 13,769, which I'm then going to turn around and give right back to them to pay for the car, and by paying $300 a month. Okay. So this is what you put in your variables in your calculator, and then you go to N, to the row N, and you hit alpha key and enter key, and this is what you'll get, the monthly interest rate. Then you multiply it by 12. Any questions on this before I go back to the equation? I see someone has a question on the equation. No questions? Okay,